Want to thank Avik for setting this up and Subbu and Srini, the bosses, for approving it, I suppose. And Sharon has been very good at hitting me on the head to stick to timelines. And Mr. Ramchandra, who's been incredibly good at organizing all the logistics for me to come here. So this title, I don't remember if I gave it, but yes, so I will bring technology, but I will put it in the context of what technology we are talking about. So technology, obviously, defense enterprises build massive things, transportation, energy sectors build massive things. And then you also have wearable technologies where we are headed, nano things, this, that. So there is a context to all that, and a week's last point about carbon footprint kind of connects these things. We're in a world where we need to worry about how we are doing things. All life is carbon based as far as we know, but maybe in your lifetime you will find that there is other forms of life, but life pollutes and we are very good at polluting. So now we realize that maybe we are a little too good at it. So we need to step back and see if we can do less of it. So if I can move forward here, yeah. So I think I was told I should say something to motivate the young people. So there are incredibly successful people in the room, so I should be careful. And there are young people who will be incredibly successful one day. So the advantage I have is probably I'm the oldest in the room, so I'll use that senior citizen advantage to say something. Life is a random walk, which typically this is the pointer here. Typically we think of this when it comes to the statistics of random walk. But there is something else called biased random walk or Levy walk, which if you've done something on life, you probably know what that means. This is animation of how bacteria move. So life, we sometimes make random walks, but we can bias it. Fish and bacteria and so on bias it by using environmental gradients, or they are either looking for food or trying to avoid predation and so on. And we grow, we are born with something that is given to us by the parents, and then we have to find a way around. And only funda I learned growing up, I had to, me and my brothers had to work with my father from primary school itself, doing some physical labor before school, after school, weekends, holidays. The work didn't bother me, but what used to bother me was that I used to see other kids playing and I couldn't play as much. And then I also found out that the other kids were jealous of me because they said, this guy is working all the time, but he's somehow at the top of the class. So parents were telling them, look at that guy. So we are always comparing ourselves to others. So only thing I learned along the way, especially when you go to a place like IIT, there are some guys who will really mug through the night, and you have to find a group which is relaxing, and then you end up where you end up, So comparing yourself to others is, as a competitive, creative tension, it could be useful. But you should remember that no matter how smart you are, there will be somebody smarter. No matter how well and how fast you do things, somebody may do it better. So if you just find a way to be passionate about what you do, then you will have fun. And it's not just about finding the best thing you can do. You can look around the room or be in a restaurant. You'll see waiters who are having fun, photographers who are having fun. People enjoy. So you bring passion to anything you do, there will be always fun. So that's my little funda about life. Now moving to what I want to kind of cover. I want to take you through the entire Earth system and then come back to what technology is needs to be designed for. We are doing it right now as the demand rises without worrying so much. So far, we haven't worried about carbon footprint and so on. More and more people are beginning to worry about it, but there are issues still. So this is the grand picture of what we call the Earth system. So you don't need to worry about the details, but there are all kinds of connections. So this is what you would call the geosphere, which is the natural world with its atmosphere, its ocean, frozen parts, and the biology and so on. And human beings have now become part of what we call forcing. So the energy from the sun is coming in, and then the thermal energy is going out. As long as they are in balance, Earth remains in some sort of a balance. There are changes that happen because naturally the sun's energy coming in changes and so on and so forth. But we have become a forcing because we have started to remove things that are buried in the ground. We are taking it out and we are burning it, and we are changing the greenhouse effect or the blanket that's so useful, that provided us the opportunity to evolve on Earth and so on. So we have become like the sun or the volcanoes, which also take out things and spew into the atmosphere. But obviously we are overdoing it. So now we are trying to see how we can alleviate our own impact on the planet. This has happened all along, and it's not like planet is going to go anywhere or biology is going to go anywhere. It's only our ass we have to worry about. Will we survive our own impact on the planet, right? Planet has seen meteorite crashes and big changes and so on. So we just have to worry about how can we thrive and still, not destroy the planet, the home. Of course, you can start thinking maybe we'll start colonizing the moon and the Mars. Maybe you will do it in your lifetime, but even then, sustainability is a thing. Mahatma Gandhi talked about sustainability in the 1920s, before it was even a word. And when he was asked, what do you want India to be like? Do you want it to be as rich as the UK? He said, it took the whole world for the UK to become so rich. How many worlds will India require if it wants to become as rich as the UK? Now, this kind of vision is what we need to think about sustainability. So I'll start with the kind of data we are gathering. The picture looks much more sharp here than here, so projection is somehow destroying it a little bit, but bear with me. We are collecting lots of data to observe the Earth system. This is called the second Copernican revolution, where during Copernicus we used to sit on Earth and look outside the universe. We went from the geocentric view to the heliocentric view and so on and so forth. Microscope came and so on. Now we are going out and looking in, and we are going further and further away from the solar system and so on. But we have enormous number of platforms now in the air, on land, in the ocean, robots, little things that fly around, big satellites that collect data. We are generating massive amounts of data, and you are all data people. So what do we do with this data? So we need to basically combine those with the dynamic models that we have for doing the weather prediction, climate projection. Many of you may have heard how we are talking about what may happen in 2050 or 2100. There are many details, because when you go into the future, you have to start assuming what the technology will look like, what energy sources will look like, how we'll be moving around in terms of transportation, what the policy will look like, how we will protect the poor people, and so on and so forth. Nonetheless, now the challenge for models, I'll show another slide next, is how can we begin to resolve things literally from microbes to clouds? And clouds are, they're starting from molecular level, growing into planetary scales. So there is lots of money. Schmidt Futures, for example, Eric Schmidt has put in many $1 million at Caltech and MIT and so on to develop models from AI, not even go to the dynamic equations that we typically solve, so-called Navier-Stokes equations, for those who know. So the idea is that we have to go to clouds are very difficult to do. So when we want to predict temperatures, it's very easy. When we want to predict rainfall, it's tremendously difficult. So this is a big challenge that Eric Schmidt wants to help solve. So now you imagine that you are covering the planet with so many grid points into the ocean, into the atmosphere, on land, and you want to make it as high resolution as possible so that you can resolve things at the scale. So the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change started to do the assessments in the 1990s, and now you hear very regularly the assessments coming out, a lot of news happens. The first assessment, which was released in 1990, the models were running at the order of 500 kilometers in terms of the grids. These grids were 500 kilometers. So now you imagine that you are covering India with 500 kilometer grids. There will be just a few. Bangalore will not be even one grid. So then within that, you're trying to do clouds and rain and temperature and so on. Obviously not very useful, but we came a long way since then. Second assessment, which was released, I think, in 2001, third assessment, fourth assessment. So the fifth and sixth assessments have been released. Sixth assessment just got released last year. We are still order 100 kilometers, but we have added more details. We have added carbon, we have added human activities, we have added vegetation, response, carbon cycle, and so on. So even though the physical grids remain fairly coarse, still not good enough, but we have added more feedback. So the Earth system is all about how things feed back to each other. Okay, system is a very common word that we are intuitively used to, but you can think of our own body as a system. We have a digestive system, we have the circulatory system, we have the skeleton, muscular system, and so on. Everything has to work together, so the components don't do something by themselves, but when you put them together, they can do something that each component cannot do by itself, right? So imagine now that you want to take this to the order of 1 kilometer, because in the end, that's kind of what I think this is supposed. Whoops, I clicked the wrong one there. Whoops. Okay, this is a very nice animation, I think. Sharon, how should I try again? No. Okay, I'm too old to click it quickly, I guess. So basically, this is showing the animation of CO2 around the planet. This is the biosphere, so ocean chlorophyll, land chlorophyll. This shows how the ocean is full of what we call eddies, little circulatory systems. So what is the challenge? That everything is happening at very, very small scales, and in terms of just the computational power, the storage, and even the analysis, if you go to 1 kilometer grid, you will generate massive amounts of data, which I'll show in a minute. And to make weather and climate forecasts, you have to combine all that data you are collecting, terabytes of petabytes of data, you have to assimilate into the model to initialize the forecasts, and then you integrate forward. The longer you integrate, the more the computational power you need, and you will be burning more energy than most countries in the world. So are we really saving the planet by doing these simulations? They have to be really reliable to justify that kind of energy usage, right? The other thing is also that you cannot really go beyond 1 kilometer even if you magically ended up with a massive computational resource, because the assumptions about the turbulence and so on in the dynamic system do not work so well when you go below about 500 meters, okay? And the other big problem, I think I have 30 minutes, so somebody can warn me. Other big problem is you will generate so much output from these models even now, even if they are running at 100 kilometers. There is chemistry, biology, circulation, winds, physics, clouds, rain, temperature, everything. To analyze these right now, it's okay because you can still do graphics, this, that, animations, these kinds of things. But when you go to 1 kilometer grid, you will have so much output that you can only use something like AI to extract the best information out of them. There is no way to do simple graphics by downloading the data and trying to analyze. All the statistical methods we use, empirical orthogonal functions, principal component analysis, they are not going to work with such massive systems. You will need very intelligent analysis, and that will just come down to AI kind of approach. The other thing is, even if you do 1 kilometer scale forecast, let's say, yesterday everybody was complaining at dinner about Bangalore rainfall and where they came from and how little rainfall creates all these puddles and traffic jams in Bangalore. Or let's say a heat wave comes and hits Bangalore. The impact of such events is very local. It's happening literally at neighborhood scales. So the 1 kilometer scale is still not good enough. So you will need to take that 1 kilometer forecast, which is probabilistic. Temperature has a higher skill, but rainfall will be, 60% chance of rain, 70% chance of rain, and so on. You will still have to take that information down to neighborhood scale, and that will still comes down to using AI to do that. So the last mile problem, as we say, to provide designer information for Srini to make sure that he can get from the Hilton to Marriott, one day he will pay for it, because that's what rich people want. They want precise information on water, agriculture, food, energy, health, transportation, and so on. So right now we are producing early warning systems using AI for irrigation for Sahyadri Farms, which has revenue of 500 crore, which is probably 1% of what Aerospike does. But agriculture is still a very important sector, provides 60% of the employment in India, and farmers are really part of the healthcare system if you think about food and nutrition and health and so on, right? And energy companies are paying for managing intermittency. They want to know how cloudy it will be tomorrow, because by 24 hours ahead they have to purchase power. So there is great demand for information from all these sectors, and you can deliver these. You have to train people to use this probabilistic information, which farmers do all the time, right? Farmers are starting every season with some guesswork on when rainfall will start, what crops they should choose, what will happen. This year has been erratic. Every year is now erratic. So the total amount of rainfall almost doesn't matter. How it's distributed matters more. And even if you provide information on the total rainfall, you can still help the Rabi crop. So Kharif may not do so well, but you can use that water to do Rabi. India used to have most of the food production in Kharif, but now we have just as much production in Rabi as well. So all these need technologies and advisories, and it all has to be done to be basically carbon neutral someday. But right now we are on this emissions reduction paradigm, which is obviously not working. Just to digress a little, in the sense we have negotiated for 25 years and the emissions are not coming down. So we need a revolution in technology to actually maintain our lifestyle and still not do harm to ourselves and our health and so on and so forth. So that is a broad context, and this is what the schematic would look like. So you can see this is a big data challenge in the geoscientific context. Data size now exceeds 100 petabytes and is growing quasi-exponentially. Tapering of the figure here shows how we have to extract information. In fact, Sharon had taken this and the rendition had completely changed the meaning. So I told her, no, please put it back. Okay, so the speed of change exceeds 5 petabytes a year. Data taken at a frequency of up to 10 hertz or more, and reprocessing and versioning are common challenges. So I won't read all of it, but you can get the idea from here. We are combining observed and simulated products to create big data. So volume of the data itself is very critical, as we see here. Velocity or speed of change, and it's not just physical change. It's not how quickly rainfall patterns are changing, temperatures are changing. It is how biology is changing, how crop yields and even possibility of growing certain crops in certain regions are changing, how health impacts are changing, and how landslides are happening and affecting infrastructure and energy demand and so on. And the variety of data, you are getting Eulerian data, which is collecting, sitting somewhere, and Lagrangian data where robots are moving around, satellites are moving around, aircrafts are moving around, and so on. And veracity or uncertainty of data. This is really, really critical. So I help the Indian labs, Indian government to improve forecasts, and you can get something like, let's say, 30 billion points of data every morning at 6 a.m. You have to do quality control before you can assimilate into the model so that you can do weather forecast or climate forecast. Just that quality control is such a nightmare that right now we don't know exactly how to do it. So most models end up rejecting 60%, 70% of the data. We're collecting all this data and we're not able to use it because we haven't become very good at doing quality control. And there has to be some dynamic consistency between the models and the data for the system to be able to integrate forward accurately and so on. So massive problems. All operational centers uh, deal with this problem. And there is no match so far between the data people and the climate forecasters on how to deal with this quality control issues. So you want to take those and produce knowledge from the data. So you want to have patterns and knowledges small and digestible, right? It's not useful to tell everybody that global warming caused Himachal landslide and global warming also caused Libyan floods. You have to be more specific, right? You have to give why local risk is different. Why did it happen in Himachal or some town in Himachal and not in Manali or Shimla, but somewhere else? So you have to come down to those local levels, which is where this is a great challenge of data merging with observations and extracting knowledge from data. And it has to be real time critical in some areas and not all. So if you have a explosion of health issues, cholera, dengue, malaria, whatever, or traffic issues, floods, you need real time information. They have to be integrated across disciplines. So you have to produce not just weather and climate forecast, but you have to translate it to, as I said, food, water, energy, health, transportation. These tend to be the big sectors, but obviously you can add more. And you need confidence and robustness, so you can feed it back to the data and models to say how to improve these things. So the models are pretty amazing. If you just give it energy coming from the top, they can produce the monsoon and everything inside, but they are a little, they are not perfect. It's like having a car that pulls a little to the side. So you have to obviously take it to the mechanic and keep trying to fix it. And this is what modelers do. They are always trying to improve the models. But there are irreducible uncertainties like clouds or the impact of dust on clouds, for example, pollution on clouds and so on. But as I said, people like Schmidt Futures are putting money into using AI to improve these things. So you can see how things come together to solve this big problem. Okay? So I'll close with this slide basically to say we are obviously looking for solutions, and climate change is a problem only if we continue to do everything in a carbon-based system. So right now we are in a carbon trap. Everything we are doing, this is carbon footprint, this is carbon footprint, everything is carbon footprint. Can we go to a system where we decarbonize? As I said, the negotiations for reducing emissions as a paradigm has not worked because the emissions keep going up. Countries like India and China have no choice but to burn more coal because we want to grow economically, and US will say don't buy from Iran or Russia, and they say don't burn coal, right? And tricky thing is also Russia invades Ukraine and Putin turns off the gas and Europe suddenly says, oh, we may have to burn coal. So we have to really protect the interest of developing countries in all this in terms of technology as well. We have to basically leapfrog the path they took in terms of burning fossil fuels, and we are here because of them. They often say population is a problem, and China and India and Brazil and Mexico will keep growing in population. Even if you killed all the poor people since Industrial Revolution, would basically have the same problem because all the emissions have come from the rich people. Of course, we have to be careful now because most people in the room are rich who are also emitting like the US. So we are all together in this now, so we cannot really point fingers, right? So this is how you would think about it. So the size of the circles here represent the amount of emissions. Obviously, energy is a big one. Everything gets used for, every sector needs energy. So you want to think about reducing sources of emission, and you want to also increase the sinks, the ability to naturally take up CO2. But in the end, you want some smart minds to come along and do carbon capture and sequestration kind of things, which will suck out carbon dioxide from the air like Coca-Cola. This will be needed, absolutely no way out of it. Right now, there are many ideas. Lots of minds are working on it, but we are not scalable yet. But if you think about the COVID vaccine and how we cracked that problem, people argue that it was not perfect, but I think it did the job. You have to decide for yourself whether vaccines did the job or not. So when we put our minds together and there is a lot of money behind it, right? Capitalism is the best most consistent system for innovation. So if money is there, Srini will invent anything, right? So that's okay. Make money, but save the world. You don't have to destroy the world to make money, right? So that's how we would think about it. So these are the kind of numbers in terms of CO2 equivalent in gigatons. CO2 equivalent, some of you may know, carbon dioxide is the biggest greenhouse gas, but there are also methane and nitrous oxide and so on. We want to convert them to CO2 and create one measure for greenhouse gases that's called CO2 equivalent. That's what you want to track, right, for warming rates and so on. So you want to shift production to reduce the emissions from energy sector, and you want to enhance efficiency as well and improve the system. Srini was saying nuclear will solve all the problems. True, nuclear is renewable, so is hydro, solar, wind. Solar is what is driving everything, right? Solar energy is what plants are converting to food and producing winds. So everything is solar in the end. Plants do it very inefficiently because they are only harvesting light at 2 to 5% because they have a lot of solar cells, a lot of leaves. We have to do much better, right? Food, agriculture and land use. Food now, agriculture now produces almost 25% of the emissions, so we have to improve that, for example. Smart agriculture, lots of technology options there. And doing early warning systems for all these is just one part of it. Then you need the technology to use those early warnings to reduce emissions. Industry, so steel and cement are two big ones, so they have to be improved. Use of waste, so refrigerants are a big problem, but you have to be careful. The West is playing a game again, saying cooling will become a big problem because India and China will buy a lot of air conditioning. Right now, heating takes much more energy than cooling. Who is using heating energy? Not India, right? So we have to be careful. So transportation, of course, shifting to EV is happening, but of course the energy source has to be very clean as well. Buildings use a lot of energy, and we have gotten into the habit of having glass fronts for all the buildings in India, which is not a good idea, but can we do that by having natural aeration, cooling and heating? That's possible as well. In terms of sinks, use degraded land, shift agricultural practices, protect and restore ecosystems. These are all kind of, there are so many co-benefits associated with them. India has 7,200 kilometers of coastline. If you recover mangroves, mangroves sequester 3 to 10 times more carbon than the forests on land, and they don't burn. Forests are great, I love forests, but this year forests are burning everywhere, from the US to Europe to Australia, right? They can emit all that carbon in an instant, but subaquatic vegetation doesn't do that. So they have, and mangroves will improve oxygen, fish, livelihoods, and protect against storms and sea level rise and so on and so forth. So coastal ocean and sinks, engineered sinks. Ocean takes up 93% of the additional energy that we are generating because of global warming and takes up 25% of the carbon dioxide as well. And improve society. So health and education, which is what we have to do anyways. Otherwise, West will have this tunnel vision on carbon and keep saying mitigation, mitigation, mitigation. But even if you limit global warming to 1.5 degrees C or 2 degrees C, it doesn't guarantee you what will happen on India. We may still have extreme rainfall and so on. So we need adaptation, which is, managing the unavoidable. Many of the unavoidable issues are already here because of climate change, which is created by the West. So we must focus also on adaptation and not fall again for this tunnel vision on carbon and mitigation. Okay? So we have already colonized the future in many ways, so we should colonize it with better solutions. So technology is what I'm saying will help us save the future. If we don't do something for future generations, we should hang our heads in shame. So thank you.